Okay, looks like we're live. I will give just a little bit of introduction in Portuguese, and then we change to English, back to English, all right?
Sounds good.
Pessoal, então, muito obrigado aí pela presença de quem está chegando. A gente vai dar aí alguns minutinhos. Quem está me assistindo ali pelo Instagram, eu convido para ir lá pro YouTube. A gente está com o link aí. A live vai ser transmitida principalmente lá no YouTube. E quem está chegando aqui agora no LinkedIn, no Facebook e também no YouTube, vai ser um prazer poder discutir, debater com vocês aqui. Eu espero receber os comentários de vocês. E hoje eu tenho o prazer de ter aqui Henrik e Kniberg comigo, né? Então, vamos embora. Eu vou agora trocar o idioma para o inglês e a gente segue essa live aqui em inglês. So, Henrik, my friend, thank you so much for coming and joining us here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And it's a long time no see, right?
Yeah, last time I was physically there. I was at your place.
Yes, and 11 years ago already.
Yeah.
Time flies a lot, man. So let me contextualize you why we are doing this. I also invited Mary and Tone and Pat Reed and a few other folks to join us and talk about agility. But actually, I am trying to bring up this concept of what I call root agility, in the sense that some people still think that adopting some sort of tool like Scrum or Kanban, and maybe even creating a team and calling a team squad, they are already agile. But we know that this is not true, right?
Oh, it works. It works. You just name your team to squad and you're agile automatically. It works.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'd like to hear. And also, in my understanding, well, in Brazil, and I would like to hear from you how it's happening outside in other places. But in Brazil, recently we created a new profession that we called agilist. And the agilist is like a mixture between, is a merge between the Scrum Master and an agile coach. And it's more like a facilitator of the team. But sometimes, as I said, I've seen agilists that don't actually help the team to deliver more value, and sometimes they focus on the wrong things, like trying to to just make sure that ceremonies work. But when you look to the deliverables, they're not happening. And you are known here as for being the author or the creator of the Spotify model. Would like to hear a little bit of that story from you. We know that this was not supposed to become a framework or something like that, and that was created to solve a specific problem that Spotify had when you were there. I don't know, is it like more than 10 years already, or how long was that?
I think, yeah, maybe at least 6 years or something since I was there.
Right, 6 years, yes.
Wow.
And you probably didn't you wouldn't imagine that what you guys have done there would spread like crazy.
No, to me it was just an interesting case study. That was it.
Yeah, and now everybody calls a team. If it's an agile team, they call it a squad. You like you named it.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So could you please just let us know? And oh, by the way, I also would like to connect the discussion here with the thing that we have there: scale, culture, and organizational structure. When we are like a startup or a small team, we know that it's like it's easier to be agile. But when you are like a 2,000 people company or even more than that, and you have to organize your team sometimes to develop concurrently on the same products, things may get a little bit messy, right? And what's your vision in terms of what we could call rootability? What are the skill sets that a person, and I'm not intended to focus on the person of the agilist, but actually on everybody that is involved on the software development context, that they are developing products using technology development, could be an executive, a manager, a developer, an architect, or anyone. How, in your vision, what are the set of skills that these people should acquire to in order to be agile, uh, um, true agile, I would say. I mean, using agility to deliver more value, to learn faster, and to improve relentlessly, and how you connect that with the thing of okay, let's scale them to the entire company, let's get business agility.
Hmm.
So please share a little bit of your vision about those concepts.
Wow, that's a lot of questions. That this is complicated. You're putting me on the spot here. What are the skills? It's interesting. Like when it comes, I think you're more like what are the attitudes, personalities you kind of want to promote for Agile to be successful.
Right.
Um, and maybe one of the main ones is curiosity, because Agile is a lot about trying things and learning rather than pretending to know in advance. So
Mm,
if as a team, if everyone in the team is genuinely curious of who is the user and what do they need, and does our product solve their problem? Am I working on the
hmm.
right thing? Does it work? That attitude, I think, tends to create some agility almost on its own.
Right.
But then from a leader perspective, I would say a really important skill, or at least a knowledge area, would be systems thinking. Because
Hmm.
you know, if you want to be agile, especially if you're got a lot of people, you can't understand everything that's going on. And if you
Right.
try to impose traditional control systems, that'll give you more control, but it slows everything down and reduces innovation. So that kind of kills agility. So if you want to be agile at scale, if you really understand systems thinking, I recommend reading up on it, or attending a course or something. And then you start thinking differently. You start thinking not so much as in how do I get people to do what I want. You think more like, how can I create the conditions that enable teams to be awesome and deliver great stuff? And if a team
Right.
is failing, instead of saying who screwed up, it'll be what was wrong with the context that I set up as a leader. What can I do
Right.
to create a context where the team learns from their mistakes and improves? It's just a different mindset, and at least for me, that became more clear when I started looking into systems thinking.
Right. So let's try to contextualize to make it easier for you a little bit. Let's suppose we are discussing let's say a big corporation, 50,000 employees spread around the world, and
Yeah,
then an IT department that has to serve it, right? And they want to become more agile.
yeah,
And like fomenting curiosity is interesting. Developing the attitudes, as you said, on a single cell or a small team. That's something that can work. But and then, in the other hand, as I said, these leaders they may think that, all right, let's standardize everything. Agile now is this flavor of agile that we're going to
yeah.
use. And then how how do you think that these guys, these leaders of these organizations, can foment agility without killing it right on the birth?
Right. Yeah, I think a common mistake that especially big companies make sometimes is they just roll out a process, like, and now everyone's going to follow this process.
Like
And then,
Spotify model, man. I've seen that a lot here.
yeah,
People think that, oh, that Spotify model will solve our problems.
and you basically look around for something that looks like a recipe, and then you apply it. Um, but I find it works better if you take a little bit more time to help everyone understand what is the underlying problem we're trying to solve. What do we want to be like as a company? What are the key principles we want? For example, Spotify. A lot of people look at the Spotify model and they think like squads and tribes,
Right.
but well, that's not the part that excited me so much. It was more the philosophy of we want every squad to be autonomous and be able to deliver stuff and make decisions without having to wait for others. That was kind of the
Right.
guiding principle, which has nothing really to do with agile. It was guiding principle, and agile was kind of, and Scrum were just tools to help us
Hmm.
apply that.
But did you have to synchronize what different squads were delivering, like to accommodate the product roadmap or something like that?
Yeah, there was synchronization needs, but I think that the important thing was that it was very well um, like understood by everyone there that what we want to do is ship fast and
Right.
innovate fast and learn fast and not be blocked as teams, because there was a sense of urgency in that this was a startup that was competing they were basically trying to change the whole music industry. And then later on, when Apple and Google, big companies started competing with Spotify, then they even more felt the sense of urgency. And the only competitive advantage they had was the speed of innovation. So everyone's understanding that, okay, we really have to be fast. Then, well, what does that mean? Well, okay, if we have teams that are waiting for each other, that's a problem. What can we do to not have to wait for each other? Or we have teams that need to coordinate. How can we do that in the simplest way possible? So this need for being able to move fast and autonomously drove a lot of other things, kind of.
That's awesome. So when you say let's focus on the problems we want to solve, those might be related to like customer problems and also process related problems like this one you mentioned. That's cool.
Although I want to add one thing too, which a lot of companies forget, which is that you need a lot of technical infrastructure in place, especially for a large scaling context, for teams to be able to, let's say, test automation is mandatory if you're going to be able to move fast. And agile architecture, the ability to ship things fast and change the architecture, and the ability to do test automation on all platforms that you're running on. This takes time. It needs people to spend time doing it. And sometimes that kind of gets forgotten. Like, it's not just putting sticky notes up on the wall. We need to actually spend time making technology or buying technology to enable us to be agile.
And that you touched a very, very interesting topic, in my opinion. And it's because, and I'd like to hear your perspective as well, if you've seen that also in other places. And here in Brazil, most of the agilists and maybe a very large amount of the agile coaches we have, they aren't able to teach how to build those things, the technical side of agility. And we know that it's really mandatory, as you said. If you want to deliver excellence, we're gonna need to have it. And I was going, and in the beginning, asked what is the kind of skill set that we need. So what tools and what kind of knowledge, and technically speaking, you'd recommend agilists to study, even if they aren't technical people? We know that, for example, if I'm not a developer, I may not be able to help somebody to refactor a code or to improve a test. But what is there some sort of knowledge that I, even not being a developer, I can develop, technically speaking, to help my teams to put on this kind of infrastructure?
Well, I would say, like, here there seems to be two different schools of thinking around coaching. One school of thinking is that a coach does not need to know the domain of the person that they're coaching. So a really good coach can coach a dentist, even though they don't know nothing about that work.
Oh,
just
that's
coaching,
a good point.
Questions and helping people to self-reflect. The other kind of philosophy is more that, you need to understand the work of the person you're coaching. You should be an expert in that field. Only then can you effectively help them. Those two schools of thinking conflict with each other, right? They're saying the opposite.
Yes.
So I'm a little bit unsure of where I stand, but my personal experience is that I find that coaching is more effective from what I've seen when the person doing the coaching understands the domain really well.
Perfect. I'm with you.
Yeah. So from that perspective, I would say you don't need to be a master coder, but if you don't know anything about coding, it's going to be hard to coach a coding team.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's going to be hard to earn their respect, I think.
It will require much more questions.
So if you happen to be a really good coach, I would say maybe you kind of have to take your pick, right? Either you really learn coaching as a skill on its own, you take courses, read books, attend certifications, and you kind of build your skill as a coach. Then maybe you can get away with not knowing the domain because you're just such a good coach. But or maybe the other approach is saying that it's okay if I'm not the best coach in the world. I'm a decent coach, but I'm going to learn coding because I'm coaching coders and I need to understand the language they're speaking and the problems they're facing. So then I would just say, learn to code. You don't need to become an expert coding, but just learn a little bit would help you a lot. Probably.
And now it's even easier with ChatGPT, right?
Just tell it to code, and then, but then you have
Yeah,
to plug it.
just give me the code, and now I know how to code.
Yeah.
Yeah,
GPT is very good at writing code that looks very nice on the surface, and then you look a bit closer, saying that this code won't even compile, but it looks nice, right? And it's a good starting point. But
yeah. At least as a boilerplate to start, I think might be interesting.
it's like a student in a university who doesn't really know what they're doing, so they copy paste a bunch of stuff that they find on the internet and put it together like a Frankenstein. That's
Right.
kind of what ChatGPT does, but it does it pretty well. So it gets away with it.
It's still going to Stack Overflow to get the
Yeah.
answers.
But I mean, this is
Very
just
cool,
a matter
man.
of time. That's going to get better. So I think that's really, this is a separate topic maybe, but that's really interesting. I think in the future, as a coder, it's not about you writing all the code. It's about you coaching the AI, giving it the right instructions, giving it the right feedback, and then
Yeah,
doing all the grunt work coding is my guess.
yeah. Certainly, it's changing a lot, and I think the future might be interesting at least.
Yeah.
I'd say.
But I'll say
Uh,
another coaching thing in general, I find it very like coaches that are kind of Renaissance people, like wide. They learn a little bit of coding, they learn a little bit of design thinking, right? A little bit of product management, a little bit of here and there. It makes them very effective because then they can connect people and bridge people and understand roughly what's going on at a high level. So I think those kind of coaches are very powerful. But
yeah, and I think you actually brought an interesting time that I will certainly reflect about this because, in my experience, also, if you have more knowledge about the technical aspect of what you're trying to improve, you're gonna be probably gonna have better results. But you made me think that good coaches actually don't need to know, right? And maybe it's a good tip for everybody to study more about coaching. And when we want to become agile coaches or even agilists or scrum masters, we probably study a little bit of facilitation, a little bit of
yeah,
agile coaching, but not really coaching itself, like
yeah,
the human behavior, the human aspect. And in the beginning, you said that developing or exploring the right attitudes, like curiosity and attitude, for me connects with behavior and therefore with mindset. And I'm pretty sure that you have been involved in several interesting endeavors where you helped companies as Lego and Spotify and others to improve their value delivery. What would you say about mindset change? And just to connect, one of the things that I've seen is that leaders, especially the C-level ones that are not involved in the operation, but they still want their company to be better, to deliver better software, and they believe that agile method will help. So they decide to go to a full transformation. But then they hire somebody like me and you, and they try to outsource everything to these guys, and they sometimes they get disconnected with what's going on the factory
yeah.
floor. What would you say to these executives, the main executives of these big corporations? What about how they could change their mindsets and therefore get better results?
Yeah, I think you touch upon a very important topic there because a very common pitfall that I would say probably most agilists or coaches fall into, probably on a regular basis, is coming in and trying to do the manager's job
Mm,
instead of helping them. So it's kind of you come in and you're doing things that actually the manager should be doing, um, if they understood the agile better. And it can
mhm,
sometimes become a very strange thing where either the manager becomes alienated and
mhm.
feels threatened, or they just think that, oh, that's nice, I don't have to lead anymore because this person is doing it, and you kind of create this gap without knowing it. So I think it's really important to think about what can I do to make myself redundant in a sense as a coach.
Perfect.
um, because
So
if you think about it, these things like creating the context for a team to succeed, that's leadership. That's what a good leader does. So it's a little bit dangerous to kind of outsource core leadership stuff to a coach.
yeah, I totally agree. And when you say coaches doing the work of the managers, uh, are you do you mean like a change management for the organization, or the real operations, the real business operations.
Well, let's say, for example, something that coaches typically do that I often end up doing is coming into a company and seeing that, okay, there's a lot of misalignment here. People are running in different directions and aren't in sync with each other. So by adding some basic visualization to show this is what's going on, maybe adding a board on the wall, having us stand up in front of that board every day, then people start becoming aligned, and now they can, talk to each other and work in the same direction. That's leadership, right? It is helping a team become aligned. And ideally, you shouldn't need coaches for that. That's typically, that's what I think of as a leader's job in that kind of context. But if a leader's not used to that, if they're not used to doing that, then they may need some help.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. And sometimes they have a good start, but sometimes it's also a false start.
Yeah.
It's just the start, and then right away they go back to the old ways of working and thinking, and I think that's dangerous, because then people that are in the, let's say, factory floor trying to make that happen, without proper support from leadership, they are basically alone, right?
But one thing I'd like to share, though, like a tool that's been very useful for me when I've had kind of coach roles, I learned it, I think, from Lisa Adkins. Maybe I morphed the model unconsciously, but I think of it kind of like there's three kind of attitudes or three hats that I can wear as a coach, and I try to wear only one at a time. One of the hats is the coach hat. When I wear the coach hat, then I don't have any agenda of my own. I'm not trying to help the company specifically for anything. There's no such thing as.
So you are not worried about Scrum or Kanban?
No, I don't give a damn. I'm just worried about what are you worried about? What do you want to achieve?
Okay.
Right? And if your goal is to achieve waterfall really well, then I'm going to help you with that because I'm the coach.
And that's not the hat of the agile coach. The coach.
No, it's the coach. There's nothing to do with agile.
Perfect.
And then there's the mentor hat. As a mentor, I bring domain knowledge and skill, and I'm trying to transfer that skill to you. So I'm basically a teacher. So that requires me to know this thing. So let's say test automation. I'm helping a team no, I'm not coach. I'm trying to teach them how to write unit tests, for example. And so I have a goal, which is to transfer the knowledge. I don't have any specific goal for what they're going to do with that knowledge, though. I'm just trying to help them learn how to use the tool. So again, nothing to do with agile in a sense. So I guess it could be if I'm there as an agile mentor, I'm trying to teach them Scrum, for example, right? But it's a different hat than the coach hat, right? The coach hat doesn't require domain knowledge. The mentor hat does.
And the coach will not teach, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the coach will not give recommendations. If I'm going to be extremist, the coach will never give a recommendation either. Just ask questions. But then the third hat is the change agent. And as a change agent, I actually do want to achieve something. I want this company to become agile, or I want them to deliver more often, or I want the customers to be happier. There's something that I want. Maybe they asked me to help them with that, but I'm coming in with the mindset of I want X to happen, and now I'm going to try to influence people to make X happen.
Right.
And that's also different from the other two hats, right? So, and I find it very useful to separate those hats. I might change hats several times during a meeting unconsciously, or consciously, I guess. But before I learned that model, I realized I was often inconsistent or a little bit confused in how I work with teams. But now it's a little more clear that, okay, right now, what is my actual goal? My goal is to help them move faster. Okay, that I'm a change agent. Or my goal is to teach them how to do backlog management. I'm a mentor. Or my goal is to coach them to do whatever they want to do. Then I'm a coach. It's just
really love. It's awesome. I really love that idea. I actually never heard about this. How do you call that? Is that a name?
I don't know if it has a name. I think I just picked it up. But I think Lisa's book, Agile Coaching or Coaching Agile Teams, I forgot what it's called.
All right,
Lisa inspired it. Yeah. But I think that's where I don't know if the whole idea came from there or if it was an embryo that came from there. But
I'll make sure to add to the reading list. Very nice, man, because I myself also sometimes get lost in, what we're trying to do here. Am I a teacher now, or am I a coach now? Or and sometimes even when leadership fails in their duties, you try to help anyhow. Like let's do some sort of leadership here, and let's engage these guys. And I
Yeah.
think this is a really interesting tool.
And it can be a bit dishonest too if you're trying to pretend to be a coach, but actually you want them to become agile. You're not neutral anymore. You have an agenda, and it's useful to be clear.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then uh, another thing is that in December I made a post in LinkedIn, and most of people enjoyed, but a few of them didn't. And I said that in my perfect world of agility, agilists agilists don't exist. And why I said that, because when I started practicing or trying to be more agile, that was in back in 2003, and we didn't have any scrum masters around and agile
Yeah,
coaches and agilists, but we had some problems to solve, right? We wanted to develop better software with less bugs, improve productivity and quality and things like that. And we started learning some tools and principles and values that helped us to do that. And that started being shared amongst the team. So the team itself, the team members itself, would become the agilists. That's why we didn't need an agilist.
yeah.
And how do you see this nowadays? Because sometimes what I've seen is that a squad cannot work if they don't have a scrum master, and
Oh,
that
yeah, that's
for
not
me,
true.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's
help
actually
us understand
it
that.
is something I've been thinking about because I think about the most successful teams I've been on. They don't have a coach really. No, they don't have a dedicated role for someone who they don't have someone called a scrum master or an agile coach really. At Spotify, kind of they did, but not dedicated. Like each coach had several teams, and the teams were
Hmm.
not dependent on that coach. So,
Hmm.
so, so I think of it not so much as a person, but more like a role or a mindset. Because what there normally is there's at least one person in the group who has the mindset of a coach, who's going to maybe be facilitating things, who's going to be creating visual boards, who's going to be
Hmm.
asking open questions to people. But typically, that's not their main job. They are a developer, they are a designer, they are a leader. There's something else which is their main role, but then they bring a coaching mindset as part of that, and they bring some agile knowledge as part of that.
Yeah, and when that becomes the knowledge of the team and like just the way of working, I
Yeah.
think then that we achieved what we wanted, right?
It was nice to like for the past few years I changed role. For many years I was a coach and then for the past 3 years I worked as a designer and a developer. And coaching was just a thing that was, one of my tools, but most of my work was design and development. And then sometimes I would need to put on the coaching hat or the mentor hat because we need to fix something in how we work. And I thought that was really nice because it became more concrete. Like I knew what problems we need to solve. I felt more part of the team.
You did that for the last couple of years?
For almost 4 years, I worked on my doing as on the Minecraft team as a developer,
Right.
and
Wow,
it was
that's
just a different
nice.
different thing, building gameplay features. But then because of my background, I could help sometimes with like, oh wait a sec, we're getting misaligned between the teams, so maybe we should create some visual management. So I came
Right.
in to that company as a coach, but then gradually I morphed my role, and then my role as coach kind of faded away because mostly because it wasn't really needed as a
Perfect.
full-time role. Um,
Perfect. And
but
I think that's
I like that a lot.
and I love it. I also start coding back again last 3 or 4 years, and I just love it. And actually, uh, I believe that if we want to work with software development teams and we want to be agilists as agile coach, and as for my experience, I think that if you are a developer, then you have superpower at hands, because you wouldn't need anybody. Like if you need to build a continuous delivery pipeline, you could do that. You could work with the DevOps parts that is needed or whatever.
Yeah,
And I think those kind of skills are very interesting. Um, but you touched the point that I would like really to emphasize, which is good agile coaches, agilists, scrum masters, whatever, they become unneeded. I mean, they make themselves, um,
redundant.
how can I say, redundant. Exactly. The team can sustain without them. And what bugs me in is that sometimes I've seen some agilists or even agile coaches that they don't do that, and instead what they do, they go there and and just play the ceremonies. Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes if they are, when they're not there, the ceremony doesn't even happen.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
really interesting too, right?
yeah, and we know that having the ceremony to happen is not the most important. Actually, it's not important. The important is to deliver. But that's it. I think if we want to be good agile coaches, good agilists, we need to make our teams to work without us.
Yeah.
And I think that by sharing the same principles and values and make that the formation of the team based on strong principles and values, I think will help a lot. And okay, man, very nice, very good topics. When I was promoting this session, I used your book cover, the three of them actually, and a lot of people talked about the Scrum and XP from the Trenches book, and how that book was important to them. For some of them was really like a good friend that would be always together with them to help them understand. And I remember a very interesting story when you were at my place. You explained me how that book was written, right?
Mm.
And it was a very interesting story. And sometimes people struggle to get things accomplished, like writing a book, like delivering a hobby project or whatever. But I remember that you were in a challenging situation and you wrote the book that became a successful book. Uh, would you like to share a little bit of that story and what you learned and why you wrote that book and
Sure.
why you think was so successful?
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting story, and I learned a lot from it, which has helped me later on too. But basically, I worked as a manager for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years at the Swedish company, and that's when I was doing and all this experiments that later on ended up in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I was interim CTO in a company that was struggling, and then I basically rolled out Scrum all the way and learned a lot from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of new to Scrum at the time. I came from kind of extreme programming, and then kind of stumbled over Scrum, and so I was learning. And I think also maybe that's why some people like the book, because it's written from the perspective of someone who's also new and learning. So
Nice.
it becomes easy to connect. But anyway, I was not planning to write a book. I'd never written anything in the past, really. But then after that engagement was finished, I was home at some point and I was sick. I had fever and I was lying in bed, bored.
That was the piece of the story that shocked me.
Yeah, because when you have a fever, you're sick. Sometimes your brain is dead and foggy, but sometimes not. So I was actually clear in my head, but my body was feverish and tired. So I was lying in bed, super bored. And I was thinking about everything that I've been learning. Because when you're in a fever state, you can go a bit crazy sometimes. And my head was just spinning about all the things that I learned and did during those years, because we did so many interesting experiments with Scrum and I learned a lot. So I was somehow trying to compile all the things I learned. And after a while, I'm like, I should write this down. So I grabbed a laptop and just looked through photos, because I like to take photos. After a meeting, I take a photo of the wall. And so I had a lot of photos. So I just basically chronologically looked through all the photos I took during that time. And I'm like, oh yeah, we did this. That was interesting. And that didn't work very well. We did this instead. That worked better. And I just wrote from the top of my head without stopping. I just nonstop wrote. And because I was in a fever state and a little bit crazy in my head at the moment, I just didn't stop. So my wife was laughing at me because every time she came into the bedroom, I'm just like, and sometimes she would kind of give me some food and I'll just keep typing, because it was like a release to getting all this stuff out of my head.
You're really dumping your brain on the
Yeah,
keyboard.
it was a dump. So I spent about 3 days just typing every waking moment. And then I kind of like, that's it. I had then my brain was empty and I was happy. And then I read that the day after. It was a 70-page article essentially full of pictures. And I looked at it and I read through it. I was like, this is good. this is interesting. It was written as one train of thought, and it's easy to read because of that. So I didn't know what to do with it. But there was this mailing list that I was a part of called the Scrum Development Mailing List. So I just put a link to the article saying, what do I do with this? I don't know, but maybe some of you would find it interesting. And then people became super positive. They're like, wow, this is really interesting. You should make a book out of this. And I'm like, but this is what? How do books work, right? Aren't books supposed to be longer? But anyway, long story short, I finally decided to publish it on InfoQ because they had a very simple process. But it's almost like self-publishing. Plus, I wanted the book to be free because so many people had read the article online. I didn't want to just cut them out. So I figured that I want the article to be free, but if people buy the printed book, then they should pay for it. And that's exactly the model that C4 Media or InfoQ had. So I just put it up there. I think I added one or two more chapters before publishing it. I added something about scaling, just added a little bit more. But basically, 80% of the book was written in that one weekend, just writing like a madman.
That's an amazing story, man. And I think I never forgot that story when you explained that to me, because it shows that sometimes when we are in our deepest troubles or in our most challenging situation, we can still get something done.
But the learning from that was that if you catch the right moment, if you catch the flow train, like this is the moment where I have something that I want to get out. If I had scheduled a time to write the book, it would never have happened.
All right.
But with catching the moment when the flow train arrived, that made the book come out. And I could repeat that later on. For example, the video I made, Agile Product Ownership in a Nutshell, was made in the same situation. I wasn't sick at the time, but I'd been thinking about something for a long time. And finally, I got inspired to make a video about it. And I just did it then at that moment without scheduling it for later. And also in one sitting. So 2 days working, continuously just to get it out. People, I mean, I'm not saying that's what everyone should do, but for me, I much prefer writing or creating something in one sitting, even though I'm working a lot of overtime at that moment, but just get it done instead of having it as a continuous thing you have to do and you feel stressed about it over months and months and months.
So the message here is don't lose the flow train.
I think the message is, if it's possible for you to create an environment where you can catch the flow train when it arrives, like there's something I want to say, something I want to do, and you catch it at that moment, no matter where you are or what time it is, then maybe you can do something like really cool that would have taken you a long time otherwise. At least that's my experience.
And if we look to this, it's kind of applying some of the lean principles, right? Reduce the work in progress and limit bad size and so on, and you focus on one thing at a time.
Definitely.
That's really nice.
And I've noticed that as a consumer of a video or book written in that way, it's easier to consume it. As a reader, you get sucked in because it's one train of thought. It seems
right. That's perfect. And all right, man. So to go to an end here, we have one question here. It's how the process of create is probably talking about Spotify. How they develop it, how they build these principles and structure. As you shared the story about the book, could you share a little bit more about how this was built, how you arrived to the single piece that we call Spotify?
Sure. So I started working with Spotify quite early, just by accident. I did a talk at a Swedish university about Agile, and it turned out that the first Spotify team was at that talk, and they were just starting the company. So they were super inspired about using Agile at Spotify, but I didn't know that I had inspired them. They told me later. And then later on, when I got asked to come and coach Spotify when they had just launched the first version of their product, then I was really impressed by what I saw. I was like, this is so cool. There's Scrum teams everywhere, and they're really applying Scrum throughout, like the culture. And then that's when they told me that they got inspired by this talk. I had no idea, so I was really, really happy and surprised. But the culture was already kind of in place when I started working with them actively. But then they grew, and there was all these issues about how do we stay synchronized with multiple teams while still moving fast. And one thing I've learned about scaling is there is no recipe. You have to really take into account the local context, but it helps to have some guiding principles. But at the end of the day, the teams have to take responsibility for themselves to experiment and kind of find the best way. So I basically planted seeds, gave people some ideas and inspiration, did some internal training, both for managers and teams. But most of it happened without, like, I didn't drive this really. I was just supporting it. But then after a few years, I just felt that this is really cool. This culture, it's different from what I've seen before. There's something special about it. And we were hiring a lot of people. So I would often spend time onboarding new people to kind of explain this is the culture that we have or are trying to create or trying to keep.
Right.
So I kind of became the internal ambassador for the culture, drawing pictures, trying to make sure we don't lose it as we grow, right? Because that sometimes happens. But then at some point, I did a talk at a conference in Paris, I think, about this about this culture, and then that went really viral. So a lot of people started outside Spotify started asking about it. That was the first time people outside knew about it. So they started asking about it, and a lot of people asked me to come and do talks, and I started feeling like a bottleneck. So then someone within Spotify suggested that I make a video about it, and that became the engineering culture video. But where did the elements in the culture come from? Well, some things, for example, the structural system with tribes and squads and guilds and chapters, that was the CTO who had the foresight to realize that we are growing so fast. We will need some kind of a structure so that he doesn't have too many direct reports.
Perfect.
Right? Because before that, it was just a bunch of squads, and then it was a CTO. And he felt that there needs to be some kind of substructure so that people can work, so that not all squads need to know what all other squads are doing. It won't scale. So, and then I'm not sure exactly why he chose these other words. We talked about it a bit. I think part of it was just because by using words like squad and tribe instead of words like team and department, then people are forced to ask, wait a sec, what's a squad? What's a tribe? And
that's
you
interesting.
can't just bring your preconceived notions, right? So it was a nice way to kind of be allowed to define your own rules for what is a tribe, what is a squad. But the interesting thing, I think, was that when he created that structure, and I helped make it real. So it was his idea, but I helped make it real in the actual, the way we work. But it was premature. It wasn't needed at the time. So a lot of squads were kind of like, what? Am I part of a tribe now? Okay, sure, whatever. It didn't mean anything to them. It was just words on paper. They just kept doing whatever they're doing. But it became like, it was pretty smart because he created the structure for us to grow into. So by the time we had too many teams and we needed a structure, it was already there instead of having to create it after the fact. So I think that was kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I'm a little bit wary of creating too many structures in advance. You can make things slow and bureaucratic. But in this case, the company was growing so fast that I think it was a smart move of the CTO to see that, oh my God, this is not going to scale with our current structure. We need to be prepared for like another structure to kind of grow into.
Right. So we could say that the model emerged, right?
It definitely emerged. But it emerged as a result of a number of guiding principles that the leaders at Spotify were very good at repeating continuously.
Guiding
for example, the notion of small teams working like a startup, making their own decisions, having a clear mission that they own end to end, being able to ship code without waiting for someone else. All these kind of core principles, they were the guideline. But then all these structural elements, such as squads and tribes, were more like a consequence of that.
That's really nice, man. I love that. The other company that I had, we didn't have a lot of rules, but we had a lot of guiding principles, and those guiding principles actually helped to form the mindset of people and therefore change their behavior to do like the same, as if we were in the same tribe, as I said. And I remember one thing that I find the Spotify model very interesting for, which is to spread knowledge about different parts of the product. And I remember once when I was launching the third version of the Lean Pyramid back in 2015, I sent you a draft of the model and asked for feedback, and you sent me one feedback about because I had in there one principle of the extreme programming, which is to move people around, right? And then you said, well, take care with this because sometimes stable teams are better than unstable teams. Like if you keep moving people around so often, you may hurt a little bit the performance of the team. And I totally agree. But once I saw a company, they developed software for energy management, and they had a few teams, I believe about 40 people or 50 people in the company, separated in a few teams. And the guy wanted to outsource development of a part of their system, and I'd like to understand the quality of the legacy code. And then when I asked the guy about the quality of the legacy code, he said, "Well, we don't have legacy code here," and that for me was a shock, because how come you don't have legacy code? What do you mean? And then he explained that he has product teams, pretty much like the you could put the squad model in there, but this was, I think, before. This was about 2013, uh, and he had product teams, and they had infrastructure teams that were cross-functional. So
Yeah.
these infrastructure teams would go and check out the code and try to get components that were becoming old and refactor the code, and that would level up everybody in all the products that they were developing. So, and they would rotate people from product teams to, I don't know how they say this, infrastructure teams, but that was a pretty interesting model. And I think that Spotify model later on came to clarify that kind of structure. I think this is a really
Yeah,
interesting structure.
similar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like doing maintenance in your car. If you don't do maintenance, you probably won't have a car so
Yeah.
long, right?
And the thing about stability, my kind of my theory about that now is just that that you need a balance. If you have 100% stable teams, you get too little cross learning. But if you have very unstable teams and everyone moves around, then you don't get this kind of super hyper productivity you can get in a tight team. So I like to
Yeah.
have a balance. I like to think in terms of a super team or a team of teams. Let's say we
Mm-hmm.
have 6 or 7 teams that together form a team of teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then that should be stable, that bigger circle. But the subcircle within can be only, it's okay if they're just somewhat stable and there's people moving around. Because
Perfect.
when people move between the teams, they bring knowledge, they bring personal relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
then people, it just seems to work really nice if you get a compromise. I would say, like, when it works best in my experience is when each team has a stable core, maybe 3 or 4 people that don't move around. They've been there since the beginning, pretty much.
Right.
They know all the systems. They know why things are the way they are. They know the architecture. But then there's a few people that maybe do a little more moving around, and then you get both. You get the tight domain knowledge of a team, but you also get cross pollination and knowledge share and kind of trust spreading around.
That's nice. I really like that idea, man. So we are getting to an end here, and still people arriving. We've got Klaus. Do you know Klaus? Klaus Westphal is a good friend from Brazil, and we have a question here.
Yeah,
Oh, before the question, Klaus is saying, "I love Lean from the trenches." Everybody
that's
does.
nice. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, ask your question, Klaus. We put this question from Vinny here once again. When you start to coach a new company, which things do you focus? What are the bases in the beginning?
That's a really good question. And I usually start with like a clear problem statement. Normally, when a company calls, they want help. It's normally something like, we want to become more agile, and I don't think that's a very useful mission, for example. So I would take that as as an entry point to then say, okay, why do you want to become agile? What problem do you want to solve? Well, we have problems with technical. Our code is horrible, and our customers are angry at us, and we're really slow. Okay, that's more concrete. Let's talk about how to improve that. So let's kind of start with that, a problem statement and a goal, and then make sure that that's understood and agreed upon by everybody. Because if people don't agree that we have a problem or that this is the problem we want to solve, then it's hard to change
Mhm.
anything. And then the second thing I try to do, once there's agreement on what problem we want to solve, then try to get clarity in terms of where are we right now. So I normally very quickly introduce visual management, for example, big, portfolio boards, Scrum boards. Just visualize what's going on, value stream maps, whatever is needed to create self-awareness. Because then I'm no longer the bottleneck. Because if everybody sees, let's say a value stream map is a good example where you see like all the different steps in a product
Mhm.
development process. If everyone looks at that and says, "Oh my God, we have all these handoffs and all these queues, and man, why does it take so long time? Why do all these features get stuck in queues for so long?" If you put
Mhm.
that on the board and people start asking that question, then they're going to come up with really cool, ideas probably. And then you as a coach can just do very light touch coaching and make a bigger impact. So that's kind of normally where I start. But then once there's some visualization in terms of where are we right now and what do we want to fix, then I basically just try to throw logs onto the fire by encouraging people to experiment, by saying, hey, you have an idea here, let's try it. Because people
Right.
sometimes fall into this trap of overanalyzing. We're going to make a change program, we're going to find the destination, and we're going to make a plan, and we're going to go through a
Right.
transformation program. And I try to get them away from that and say, let's just do a ton of experiments and let's form hypotheses. So, I think we will get stuff done faster if we put these testers in the same room as those developers. Great, let's try it tomorrow and do it for a few weeks and then see how it worked, instead of overanalyzing. And it creates this kind of like a habit, because once they do that a few times, then they realize that, we don't have to overthink things. We can try things, learn from it, and then try something else. And they start noticing improvements, and then that creates energy to try more things. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's...
Yeah, no, it certainly did, man. And I think I would add to that. When we have a small team, a small company, it's easier. But when you have, again, a large company, but I believe it's the same path, right? But you choose one problem to solve. And
Yeah,
maybe that problem can be the same kind of problem that the other teams will have. And then after the experiment proved successful, you can start rolling out, right?
yeah, 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 yeah,
I,
yeah. In a big company, you need to find a limited scope so you don't change everything. So typically, that might be, we have all these ideas, all these problems. Where do we want to start? Okay, this problem. Okay, but that affects 200 people. Let's pick one team who is most
Perfect.
interested and excited to try something different, and they will be the guinea pig. So that's the way of limiting the scope and just starting to try stuff. Because then if they do try stuff and it worked, then others will get inspired to try stuff as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We have one more question here from Klaus. And this is an interesting one. How do you decide salary raises in a collaborative autonomous team?
I have no
It's
idea.
probably into a little bit of democratic cultures,
Yeah,
I believe.
yeah. This is really hard. Like the companies I've worked at, that this usually works in a pretty traditional way. Each person has a manager, and that manager decides the salary, and there's a negotiation involved, and there are budgets involved for how much salary a manager can dish out. I've seen some companies try some more different approaches where people set their own salaries, where there's 100% transparency. I've seen a few case studies, but to be honest, in my personal experience, when I've seen that tried, it hasn't really worked. And they typically revert back to a more traditional model where there is a manager who sets the salary. I don't like that model. It just feels wrong, but I haven't seen anything else really personally. I'm still looking though.
Nice, man. In terms of this question, one of the things that I like is to have a transparency about what you need to accomplish in order to get a salary raise. And if you have a clear path, like a career path in the organization, how do you grow from this position to another? What set of skills and attitudes that you need to have? I think that may help, but still, it's very hard to. I think it's very hard to implement.
Yeah. I
Uh,
guess in terms of giving people guidance on, your own like development, I would say in general, think of it as there's a thing you do, right? Your job. Let's say your main, in a cross-functional team, you need to be able to do different things, right? But if you're a T-shaped person, which most people are, there's something which is your main skill. Just do a good job, right? If you're writing code, spend some time, really think about what is this code supposed to do, what problem is it supposed to solve, and really try to follow up on, is my code solving the problem it's supposed to solve? So that's kind of, as a craftsman, just try to do a good job. But that's only half of it. The other half of it is be a good team player. And that's where some people miss. They forget that bit. So you can be an awesome coder, but you're not good at listening, you're not good at collaborating with others, then that's going to become a problem. So kind of make sure you cover both of those bases. Like, am I doing a good job as an individual contributor? And am I a person who's good to work with? Can others collaborate
right.
with? If you do those
Yeah.
two really well, of course, it depends on your manager, right? But if you have a decent, good manager, then that's typically something that would, probably lead to a raise and a promotion. But if you have a manager who doesn't care, or a manager who is motivated by entirely other things, then maybe it doesn't matter how good job you do. In some companies, it's all about politics, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, man. Henrik, I don't know what to say, man. I'm really, amazed by the wisdom that you brought here today, and I think it's really good to hear your stories always. And one of the things, just to change the subject a little bit, recently I just posted something that I always try to be the smallest between the biggest ones. Like I always want to be close to people like you, Diana, Mary, Tom, and all these people that have learned something and we can learn from them. And also besides that, that brings us a little bit of joy. And when you stayed at my home like 12 years ago, 11 years ago, uh, I had so much fun playing and
Oh wait, you got muted. Can't hear you. Debugging in progress. Can the rest of you hear me in the chat?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, now I hear you. Cool. All right.
I can't hear. Just a second.
All right. Testing. I'll go to my settings. Hello. Testing.
I still can't hear you. What's going
Testing. Let me see. Testing.
Just a second, man. It's on my side here. My phone died and we can't hear. Just
right.
a second.
Yeah, just to make sure, if you guys can hear me as participants, tell me in the chat so that I know, or in the comments. Yeah. Oh, bye. Yeah. Okay. So they can hear me.
Cool. I can't hear anymore. I don't know what's going on here, man.
maybe reconnect.
Let me check. Let me try to put this back. How about now?
Yeah, testing. No.
Hello?
Testing. I hear you.
Oh, okay. I can't hear you now. Sorry about that.
Is it working now?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Just for a while. I think we need to go to an end here. But what I was going to say, man, is about the music because once I've heard from Mary and Tom that a good team works like a jazz band.
Yes.
As when the leadership just goes through the band and you don't even notice who is the leader.
Yeah. No, that's it. If we have time for it, just a funny story about that.
Please do.
It's just like I'm very much into music. As you see, I'm in my studio now. I'm surrounded by instruments. I got drums over there, and keyboard and bass. I'm into music.
Place.
And as a musician, you play your instrument, right? You are a specialist on your instrument. Like, let's say I'm playing bass. You're doing your thing. Everyone else is doing their thing. But if I only do my thing without listening to everyone else, it's going to sound like crap. So I'm playing my instrument, and nobody's telling me exactly what to do. But we're following some guidelines. We're playing the same chords. We're playing the same rhythm. And we're listening to each other. And that's what makes it sound good. And I think it's a perfect metaphor for a cross-functional team. Everyone is doing their thing, but it has to fit together as a whole. We have to look at the whole product together as it takes shape. And that's what makes a good product. But the funny thing is, okay, in small bands, there's usually no visible leader. Sometimes there is, but it tends to vary a little bit. You know, the song is ending. Everyone looks at the drummer. When's the last hit, right? Or maybe the guitarist is like, oh, we're gonna do another chorus now, right? Just sign language. But in small bands, normally there's no person directing, right? In a big orchestra, there usually is. And I was wondering why. And just a few weeks ago, I learned why. It's interesting. Why does a big orchestra need a leader? They all have notes. They're following the notes. Why do they need?
Right.
It turns out it's because of speed of sound. Big orchestra is so big that the person sitting on opposite ends of the room, there's latency in the sound.
Oh, interesting.
So even though it's maybe 50 milliseconds or something, sound only moves at 300 meters per second or something, right? So that adds up. So that means that they're going to get out of sync if they only listen to each other across the room.
Perfect.
But light travels very fast. So the director is using light to keep everyone in sync. So they're looking at the director, following his rhythm, and that makes it all fit together. And that was a big aha for me, that okay, that's why they need big orchestras need something to look at.
So a good leader is like a maestro, right?
I don't know, but of course this changes because nowadays a lot of musicians have in-ear systems. So your sound is here, and then there's no sound delay anymore. So they maybe don't need a conductor anymore.
Yeah. Times are changing. But man, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And I really hope we can play together again. I am telling you that I'm gonna go to visit for a few years already, and I didn't. But that promise is still valid.
Whatever happens, happens, right? Look me up if you
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for enlightening us here, and I wish you all the best. And any time that you want to come back to Brazil again, there's a lot of people here that will enjoy. We can put a party, and then talk about agility and play all together. How about
Sounds
that?
great. Sounds great. I like Brazilian music.
Yeah, it's really nice. Thank you so much, man. I will
Right.
end this session here.
Hey,
Cheers.
bye.
Thank you, guys.